Hello everyone, today we're going to be covering the Gen 4 Prius Offroad 1.5-inch lift installation. This is going to cover the Prius, Prius Eco, Prius all-wheel drive, as well as the Prius Prime. A few tools you're going to need for this job: a 22mm box end wrench, a 17mm box end wrench, a 14mm box end wrench, a flat blade screwdriver, a plastic tire iron, a socket wrench, a 14mm socket, a 10mm socket, a pry bar, a torque wrench, a 14mm socket, a 21mm socket, a 22mm socket, an impact driver, bonus points for an extension and a short extension. Alright, we're going to start by setting the e-brake and popping the hood. Once you've got the hood popped open and propped, you're going to grab a flat blade screwdriver and pull off the plastic wiper caps. Then you're going to grab a 14mm and pull off the wiper arm nuts. Once you've got the wiper arm nuts removed, you're going to go ahead and press down on the wiper arm hinges. This is going to allow them to free up and you can remove them. From here you can grab that same flat blade screwdriver and remove the plastic push pins. There's one on each side of the car. Now you're going to want to remove the driver's side plastic wiper cowl end cap. This does sit in a groove up towards the windshield, so you're going to want to remove it from that groove and then remove it from the vehicle. Once you've got this removed, you can go ahead and lower the hood again, and then grab a flat blade screwdriver and pry up on the end of the wiper cowl in order to remove it from the groove. Next, you're going to want to grab a plastic tire spoon or tire iron, anything that is non-metallic. This is important as to not scratch or damage the glass, and remove the wiper cowl from its groove. Another thing you want to be careful of, especially on some of the older Gen 4s or ones that sit in hot, dry climates, is not to break the wiper cowl where it sits in the groove. These can get dry and brittle and break when you try to remove them. Now that you've got the plastic wiper cowl unseated from its groove, you're going to go ahead and pop the hood and set the prop and remove the plastic wiper cowl from the vehicle entirely. Next, you're going to grab your 10mm socket and remove the two bolts that secure the wiper motor. There's also a rubber grommet on the back side that will hold it in. You're going to need to move it to the left-hand side to get it to unseat and then carefully remove it from the vehicle. There's also some wire clips on the back side. You're going to want to remove those to get it completely removed. I like to do this next step while the vehicle is still on the ground. You're going to grab a 14mm socket and a ratcheting wrench, and you're going to remove the two back nuts. You're going to go ahead and loosen these and take them all the way off, but you are going to leave that third one on until you get the vehicle raised up a couple steps later. The reason I use a ratcheting wrench instead of an impact or something like that is because of the difficulty to get to the back ones, as well as the fact of mitigating a little bit of risk for cracking that windshield if you by chance did hit it with something like an impact. Also, I leave that front one on just so that it allows the back two to come off easily and some more difficult to get to, and that front one stays on to hold that strut assembly intact while you raise the vehicle up. Now we can go ahead and get the vehicle up off the ground. You're going to want to grab your jack and slide it all the way back as far as you can so that it's beneath the cross member of the car. You definitely don't want to jack it up from the engine or anywhere on the plastic skid plate or anything like that. If you find it too hard to get beneath the cross member, you can go side by side. There are jacking points on each side of the car. Just go one side at a time and then support it properly with jack stands. Next, grab your 21mm and impact wrench and remove the 5 lug nuts that hold the wheel and tire on. A little trick that I like to do to save some time and headache is to take the lugs and put them on the floor and then put the wheel and tire directly over them so you don't kick them accidentally. Next, you're going to grab your 22mm and remove the bolts that hold the steering knuckle to the strut itself. I like to set these on the side that they came off of, that way when I put them back together I know that they went back the same way they came from the factory. Then you're going to grab your 17mm and pull off the sway bar end link bolt, and your 14mm and pull off the ABS line bolt. This ABS line is also held in by a little groove, so you're going to want to pull it towards you and then tilt it away from you and down and out. It's a little bit easier if you peek your head back there and check, and it goes back together the same exact way. Next, you're going to grab your flat blade screwdriver and unclip the ABS line that holds the ABS line to the strut. Now we're going to circle back to that third 14mm strut bolt that we left tight before. We're going to go ahead and remove this all the way now. Now we can go down below and remove the two strut knuckle bolts completely from the vehicle. Once again, I like to set these on the side they came out of, that way I know they go back together the same way they came out. Now that you've got these loose, you can go ahead and remove the strut from the vehicle, and then once you've got the strut removed, you can go ahead and put the spacer on top. These are not omnidirectional, they can only go one way, so as long as you have passenger on passenger and driver on driver, they will be correct. These will be etched with a G4P or G4D, signifying passenger or driver, so as long as you've got those on the right side, you should be good. You're going to want to get each of the 14mm serrated flange nuts started before you go ahead and tighten any of them down. This is because there's not enough clearance to get the nuts in there if you did tighten one down before getting the others started. If you have access to a crow's foot, this is when you could torque these. They get torqued to 37 foot-pounds. Otherwise, a 14mm box end wrench and snugging them up as tight as you can will do just fine. Once I've gone through and tightened all of these once, I like to go around and tighten them a second time just to make sure that everything got seated properly after they were all snugged down. Now you can go ahead and install the strut and spacer combo back into the vehicle. I like to start with the bottom of the strut first because you need to get the bottom to line up directly between the ABS line and the brake line. Once you've got the bottom in, you can go ahead and slide the top in, just being careful not to hit the side of your vehicle with the studs. Now you're going to want to line up the 3 studs with the 3 stud holes in the body of the car. It is important to note that there are factory washers installed between the metal wiper cowl and the body of the vehicle. Sometimes these can get in the way of the studs going through the holes, but you can use the end of your finger or a flat tip screwdriver to get them to line up properly. Now you're going to reinstall the 14mm OEM flange nuts. I go ahead and tighten these up just finger tight and then come back to them later on to snug them down properly. Now you'll want to line up the holes in the bottom of the strut with the holes in the steering knuckle. Once these are lined up, you can reinstall your 22mm strut knuckle bolts. Sometimes this step can use a little bit of wiggling back and forth to fine-tune the holes to properly line up. Once you get the bolts lined up, you can go ahead and reinstall your 22mm nuts. Once you get those installed, you can grab your sway bar end link and go ahead and install it in the hole in the strut. After that, you can go ahead and grab your 17mm flange nut, put that back on. Now go ahead and reinstall your ABS line and your brake line. Remember, there is a little groove that this sits in and needs to sit in there properly in order to get them to both seat flush against the strut. Once you've got those seated properly, you can go ahead and reinstall your 14mm bolt. Now it's time to go back through and tighten everything down. I like to go through everything once first with an impact and make sure everything's tight, and then go back through a second time with the torque wrench to make sure everything's torqued to spec. So with your torque wrench and your 22mm socket, you're going to go ahead and torque the strut knuckle bolts to 177 foot-pounds of torque. After you've torqued these, you're going to go ahead and go up to the 17mm sway bar end link bolts. This is going to get torqued to 55 foot-pounds of torque. So the passenger side is the exact same as the driver's side, so I'm going to skip over this, but I am going to give a couple tips. One thing you want to be extra careful of when removing the strut from the vehicle is not to let the steering knuckle fold too far towards the outside of the vehicle. This can cause the CV axle shaft to plunge out of the transaxle. It's not the end of the world if this does happen, but it can be a little difficult to get back in properly. Another thing that helps with the install process is a pry bar. This can be used to line up the holes in the strut with the holes in the steering knuckle and prevents you from pinching your fingers. Once you've got everything on both sides installed, tightened down, and torqued to spec, you can reinstall your wheels and tires. Then you can go ahead and raise the vehicle back up and remove each of the jack stands and lower it back down. Now you're going to come back to the 3 14mm strut nuts on each side of the vehicle. I like to start by tightening these down with a socket wrench first, and then coming back to them with a torque wrench to properly torque them to spec. These ones in particular get torqued to 37 foot-pounds of torque. It's important to note that 37 foot-pounds of torque isn't a whole lot. This isn't one of the items that really needs to be heavily torqued on in order to be tight. Using something like an impact or a long breaker bar does stand the chance of stretching or breaking the studs. Next, we're going to reinstall the wiper motor. You're going to go ahead and reinstall the harness. Before you do that, go ahead and insert it. It's going to go in the exact opposite way that it came out. So you're going to slide it from the left to the right hand side in the slot, and then you're going to reinstall your 2 10mm bolts. Once these are finger tight, you're going to go ahead and tighten them down. I'm using an impact here. My impact is set at the lightest setting possible. These only get torqued down to 4 foot-pounds of torque. Next, we're going to reinstall the plastic wiper cowl. I like to start on the passenger side. There is a groove this needs to set in underneath the plastic lip. Once you get that in, there's also a clip on the very front hand side. You want this to properly line up to seat underneath there and hold it in, and then dive the back end down to get it to line up on the driver's side. Once you've got this in place, you can apply pressure to the top lip. This is going to let the lip seat into the groove itself against the windshield. Be sure to apply even pressure and get it to seat properly, otherwise this can come disconnected from the vehicle. Now you can reinstall the wiper arms. Pay attention because these are side specific. Make sure to put the passenger on passenger and driver on driver. Once you get these seated over the arbors, you can go ahead and install the nuts. Once again, these are going to be 14 millimeters. These need to be torqued down to 16 foot-pounds of torque. Next, you can go ahead and reinstall your plastic wiper caps and your 2 plastic push pins. Now you can go ahead and lower down your hood and grab your plastic wiper cowl end cap. Reinstalling this, you're going to want to be sure to get it properly seated beneath the rubber end cap at the end and into the groove that seats in the windshield. Now that we've got the front done, we're going to go ahead and move on to the back. You're going to want to raise the vehicle from the back. There's a little jack support here. Get it as high as you can up off the ground and go ahead and support it with jack stands. Once you've got the vehicle properly supported, you can go ahead and lower down the jack and remove both rear wheels. Now you'll want to move your jack as far out to the outer edge of the lower control arm as possible without being beneath the knuckle. Once you get it to this position, you can go ahead and raise the suspension up until it just begins to compress and lift the vehicle up off the jack. Next, you'll want to grab your 14mm socket and impact as well as a 17mm box end wrench. Once the 17mm nut from the backside is off, you can grab the bolt by the washer and help assist it out as it's reversing. Once the bolt is removed, you can go ahead and lower down the jack and lower down the lower control arm. Now you'll want to apply a downward force to the outside edge of the lower control arm, which will cause it to swing out and down and allow you to remove the spring. This is also a good time to remove the lower rubber isolator and clean out any debris that may have settled. Then you can go ahead and reinstall the lower spacer, the lower rubber isolator, the spring, and the upper rubber isolator. Be sure that both of these things seat in the proper position in top and bottom. Now get your jack and place it as far out to the outside edge of the lower control arm as possible without it being directly beneath the spindle. It's important to line up the holes in the lower control arm as well as in the spindle. Sometimes it helps to move the jack back and forth and side to side in order to get these to line up properly. Next, you want to grab your 14mm bolt and insert it into the hole. I find that it helps to grab an impact at this stage and assist it into getting started in the hole. Once this is tight, you can go ahead and grab your 17mm box end wrench and tighten things down. This will also get torqued to 54 foot-pounds. You will repeat this exact same process on the passenger side as well. Next, you can go ahead and reinstall both rear tires, raise the vehicle back up, remove the jack stands, and lower the vehicle back down. Once you've got all 4 tires on the ground, you can go ahead and torque all of the lug nuts to 76 foot-pounds of torque. And you're done! Congratulations on finishing your installation, and we hope you enjoy your newfound height.